It was a night that had been anticipated for months. The Grand Gala was one of the most talked about events of the year, bringing together influential figures from various industries, celebrities, and socialites. The venue, a luxurious ballroom adorned with sparkling chandeliers and elegant decor, was filled with laughter, music, and the sound of clinking glasses. The atmosphere was vibrant yet sophisticated. Among the guests was a woman who had made a name for herself in the fashion industry. Known for her creativity, her bold ideas, and her unwavering confidence, she had built an empire from the ground up. Her style was always on point, and she carried herself with a grace that commanded attention wherever she went. On her arm was her husband, a successful businessman who had amassed a fortune through years of hard work and sharp decisions. He was known for his philanthropic efforts and his involvement in numerous charity projects. Together, they were the epitome of success. They were the couple that everyone looked up to. Their relationship seemed flawless, and their accomplishments were the stuff of dreams. Their love story was one of admiration, respect, and shared ambition. They complemented each other perfectly, and to those who knew them, they appeared as if they had it all. The evening began like any other high-profile event, with guests mingling and enjoying the fine wine and gourmet food. The couple moved through the crowd, greeting friends, speaking with potential business partners, and catching up with old acquaintances. The woman had always been at ease in these settings, confidently leading conversations and effortlessly engaging with others. But tonight something was different. As they stood near the front of the room laughing with a group of well-known entrepreneurs, a woman approached them. She was known in their industry, someone who had often been critical of the woman's work in the past. This was a person who had built her own reputation by putting others down, especially those she saw as rivals. The tension was palpable as she joined the conversation, offering a tight-lipped smile to the woman and her husband. The moment she spoke, it was clear she had an agenda. She made a sarcastic comment about the woman's outfit, calling it unoriginal and out of touch with the current trends. The words were sharp, biting, and designed to draw attention. There was an awkward pause as the woman tried to laugh it off, but the guest's tone remained condescending. The people around them stood frozen, unsure of how to react. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others pretended not to hear, not wanting to get involved. The woman's smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly composed herself. She had dealt with criticism before, but this time, something felt different. This wasn't just a casual comment. It was an attack, meant to belittle her in front of people who admired her. Her husband, standing by her side, noticed the change in her demeanor. He had always admired her resilience, her ability to handle criticism with grace, but this time he could see the hurt in her eyes. He knew that the woman in front of them had crossed a line. His protective instincts kicked in, but he held back for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. The guest, sensing the tension, didn't stop. She went on to make more pointed comments, not just about the woman's fashion choices, but about her work in the fashion industry as a whole. Each comment felt more personal than the last, and it was clear that her aim was not to engage in friendly conversation, but to humiliate. The woman's face grew warm, a mix of embarrassment and anger building up inside her. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. The crowd had begun to notice the exchange, and whispers started to spread. The woman tried to maintain her composure, forcing a polite smile as she excused herself from the conversation. But as she turned to walk away, she could feel the eyes of the room on her. It was a humiliation she hadn't expected, and it stung more than she cared to admit. Her husband watched the whole scene unfold, his expression unreadable. He had seen his wife face challenges before: business obstacles, criticism from the media, and even personal attacks. But this was different. The way the guest had targeted her in front of so many people felt like a deliberate act of disrespect. He didn't know exactly what had been said, but he knew it was enough to hurt her deeply. The woman tried to brush it off, but the damage had been done. She walked toward the bathroom, her thoughts racing. She hated feeling like this, vulnerable, embarrassed, and exposed. She had spent years building her brand, fighting to be respected in an industry that often overlooked women of color. And now, in one moment, it felt like all of that had been undermined by a cruel comment from someone who had no right to pass judgment. She took a deep breath as she entered the bathroom, trying to regain her composure. The soft lighting and quiet of the space gave her a moment to collect herself. She stood in front of the mirror, looking at her reflection. She didn't want to cry. She refused to let anyone see her like this. But the emotions were overwhelming. Anger, frustration, and the sting of humiliation. After a few moments, she composed that the car ride back to their home was filled with a quiet tension. The lights of the city blurred past as they sat in silence, the only sound the hum of the engine. The woman, still processing what had happened earlier in the evening, stared out the window, her mind racing. She had always prided herself on being able to handle difficult situations, but tonight had shaken her more than she had expected. The humiliation had come from someone who was supposed to be a peer, someone who knew better than to degrade another person in public. And the worst part was, it wasn't just about the words, it was the way they were said. The way she had been made to feel small, insignificant. Her husband, who had been unusually quiet throughout the drive, glanced over at her, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. He knew how much his wife valued her independence and strength, how much she hated being vulnerable. He could tell that she was struggling to keep it together, but he wasn't sure how to help. He wanted to offer her reassurance, to tell her that everything would be okay, but he knew she needed more than just words. As they pulled into the driveway of their home, the woman finally spoke, breaking the silence. "I don't know why it bothers me so much," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm used to criticism. I've dealt with worse, but tonight, it just felt different." Her husband parked the car and turned to her, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. "You don't have to explain it to me," he said softly. "I saw what happened. I saw how she treated you. You didn't deserve that." The woman nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She wasn't sure what to say. She had dealt with her share of disrespect in her career, but she had always been able to brush it off. But this time the words had stung more than they should have, and what made it worse was that it had happened in front of so many people. In front of her husband. She hated feeling weak, hated feeling like she had been reduced to nothing more than someone's target for ridicule. As they entered their home, the woman went straight to the living room, sinking into the couch. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Her husband, who had followed her into the room, stood silently for a moment before sitting beside her. He didn't ask her to talk. He simply sat there, letting the silence hang between them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the woman spoke again, her voice shaky. "I just don't get it. Why do people feel the need to tear others down? I've worked so hard to get where I am. I've fought for every inch of respect I've earned. And then someone like her comes along and says something like that, like it means nothing, like I'm nothing." Her husband listened, his heart aching for her. He understood the pain she was feeling, the frustration of working so hard only to have someone dismiss it all with a few cruel words. He had seen her struggle to make a name for herself in an industry that often overlooked women, especially women of color. He knew how much it had cost her, how much she had sacrificed to get to where she was. And now, to have someone undermine that effort in front of so many people, it was more than just an insult. It was a personal attack. "I know," he said softly, his voice filled with empathy. "But you can't let her win. You're not defined by what she said. You're so much more than her words." The woman looked up at him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "It's not just about her. It's about all the people who think like her. It's about the people who think they can judge me based on what I wear, what I say, or what I do. And I hate that I let it bother me so much." He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to feel angry, but you can't let it control you. You've worked too hard to let someone else's opinions define who you are." For a moment, the woman didn't respond. She just sat there, her hand in his, staring out into the darkened room. She had always prided herself on being strong, on being someone who could rise above the negativity. But tonight it had felt different. The words had hit too close to home, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being publicly stripped of her dignity. Her husband, sensing that she needed time to process everything, decided not to push her further. He simply sat with her, offering his quiet support. After a few minutes, he stood up and walked over to the bar in the corner of the room, pouring them both a glass of wine. When he returned, the days after the gala seemed to drag on for the woman, each one feeling heavier than the last. Though she had tried to shake off the effects of that night, it lingered in her mind. Every time she walked into a room, her mind would replay the cruel comments, the way she had been publicly humiliated. It wasn't just about the words, it was the way it had made her feel. It was as if, in that one moment, everything she had worked for was reduced to nothing more than the mockery of someone who didn't understand or respect her. She had always known that the industry could be unforgiving. But the sting of that night made her question just how much she was willing to endure. Her husband, ever attentive and protective, could see the change in her. She wasn't the same confident woman who had walked into that gala. Her energy seemed drained, and even her usual warmth was tempered by a new caution. He could tell that she was struggling, though she continued to hide it. She was trying to appear fine, but he knew her too well. He knew when something was weighing heavily on her. One morning, as they sat together at breakfast, her husband looked at her with concern in his eyes. "We need to talk about this," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You've been quiet. Too quiet." She looked up from her plate, startled by the question. She had tried so hard to keep everything bottled up, not wanting to burden him. But he had noticed. Of course he had. He always noticed. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, avoiding his gaze. "It's just been a long week. Lots of work to catch up on." He didn't buy it. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I'm not talking about work. I'm talking about you. I know something's bothering you, and I want to help." The woman sighed, her shoulders sagging. She had never been good at hiding her emotions from him, especially not when he was this close. He always knew when something was off. For a moment she considered brushing it off, pretending it didn't matter, but the weight of everything she had been holding in was too much. She let go of her defenses and spoke the truth. "It just hurts," she said softly, her voice tinged with vulnerability. It's not about what she said, it's the fact that it was done in front of everyone. I was embarrassed, humiliated. I've been through so much in my career, fought so hard to be respected, and then someone just comes along and tries to tear me down with one comment. Her husband's grip on her hand tightened, his face hardening in anger. "You don't deserve that. No one does." "I know," she whispered, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, "but it still stings. I don't know why it's bothering me so much. I've dealt with worse, haven't I? I've had people question my ideas, my work, my worth. But that was different. It felt personal." Her husband looked at her, his expression softening, because it was personal. What she said was meant to hurt you, to make you feel small. But you're not small. You're stronger than that, and you've been through too much to let someone like her take away your confidence. The woman met his eyes, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. She had always drawn strength from him, from their partnership. His belief in her had always been unwavering, even when she doubted herself. And in that moment, as she looked into his eyes, she remembered who she was, the woman who had fought for her dreams, the woman who had faced countless challenges and come out stronger each time. "I want to let it go," she said after a long pause. "I really do. But every time I think I'm over it, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being judged, that people think I'm not good enough." Her husband shook his head, his expression serious. "You are more than good enough. You've proven that over and over. And the people who matter, the people who respect you, will never judge you like she did." She smiled weakly, grateful for his words. "I wish I could believe that." "You don't need to wish," he said gently. "You know it's true, and if you want, we can take action. We don't have to let her get away with this." The woman looked at him, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "we don't have to let her walk all over you. We don't have to just sit back and let her think she can treat you that way. If you want to confront her, we can do that. I'll be with you every step of the way." Her heart skipped. The days leading up to the confrontation felt like an eternity. The woman couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time she woke up, it was the first thought on her mind. Should she go through with it? Should she really confront the woman who had humiliated her? Her husband had been supportive, urging her to do whatever felt right, but the decision weighed heavily on her. On the one hand, she knew she couldn't let the incident slide. It wasn't just about pride, it was about respect. But on the other hand, the idea of facing the woman who had hurt her, of putting herself in a position to confront that cruelty, felt terrifying. Her husband, noticing the anxiety in her eyes, tried to offer his support in every way he knew how. He stood by her, reassured her, and even suggested they plan the encounter carefully. "You don't have to do this alone," he told her repeatedly. "We'll figure it out together." One evening, as they sat on the couch together, he turned to her with a serious expression. "I think you've made your decision," he said. "But I want you to remember that this isn't just about confronting her. It's about taking control of your own narrative. You get to decide how people treat you." The woman met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. She had spent so much of her life striving for success and recognition, but sometimes it felt like the hardest battle was one fought in the quiet moments. The moments when no one was watching, when it was just her and her doubts. But now, with her husband by her side, she realized that it wasn't just about proving something to others. It was about proving something to herself. The next day, she finally made up her mind. She would confront the woman, not out of anger, but out of a desire to stand tall and reclaim her own dignity. She didn't want to be a victim of someone else's cruelty. She wanted to be in control of the story, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever felt belittled or underestimated. The woman arranged a meeting with the guest from the gala. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew she had to go into it with clarity. She didn't want to lash out in anger. She wanted to express how deeply the comments had affected her, and how she would not tolerate that kind of behavior. As she walked into the meeting, her heart pounded in her chest. The woman was already seated, looking calm and composed. The room was quiet, the air thick with tension. The woman took a seat across from her, taking a deep breath. She wasn't sure what the other woman's reaction would be, but she had prepared herself for anything. "I wanted to meet with you because something happened at the gala that's been bothering me," the woman began, her voice steady but firm. "I'm not sure if you realize this, but the comments you made were hurtful. They were meant to embarrass me, and they did. I've been thinking about it for days, and I feel like it's important for me to tell you that I don't accept that kind of treatment." The guest, who had initially appeared calm, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She seemed taken aback by the woman's directness, and for a moment she said nothing. The silence between them stretched on, each woman waiting for the other to speak. Finally, the guest responded, her voice tight. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know. Maybe I didn't think it through. But you know how it is, right? People talk. I didn't think it would be a big deal." The woman took a deep breath, refusing to let the other woman's defensiveness throw her off balance. "It was a big deal. It wasn't just a comment, it was an attack. You singled me out in front of a room full of people, and you made me feel like I didn't belong, like I wasn't worthy of respect." The guest looked down at the table, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't realize the impact it would have." The woman nodded, still feeling the weight of the situation. "I'm glad to hear you're sorry. But this isn't just about me. It's about how we treat each other. In our industry, in this world, women as the aftermath of the confrontation left the woman feeling lighter, more at peace. She had gone into that meeting with a lot of uncertainty, but leaving it, she realized she had done exactly what she needed to do. She had stood up for herself, not out of anger, but out of a deep sense of self-respect. She had taken back her power, and in doing so, she had set a new standard for how she expected to be treated. It wasn't just about that one encounter. It was about making sure that no one would ever again attempt to undermine her in the same way. The days following the meeting felt different. It wasn't that the hurt from the gala had disappeared, it hadn't, but the weight of it had lessened. The woman found herself walking with her head a little higher, speaking with more confidence, and even smiling more easily. It was as though something inside her had shifted, like she had rediscovered a part of herself she'd forgotten. Her husband noticed the change almost immediately. He had seen her struggle for days, but now he could see her strength returning. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She was truly present, reclaiming her place in the world. He watched her with admiration, proud of how she had handled the situation, proud of how she had refused to let anyone define her. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, she turned to him, her face serious but calm. "I've been thinking about what happened," she began, her voice steady. "And I realized something. I've spent so much of my life trying to prove myself to others, trying to gain their approval, but I don't need anyone's approval to know my worth." Her husband smiled softly, his eyes filled with pride. "You've always known your worth," he said gently. "But sometimes it takes a little reminder." The woman nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "It's not just about the industry. It's about everything. About how we let people treat us, how we let their words shape our self-image. For so long I've let other people's opinions dictate how I feel about myself. But not anymore. Her words were like a revelation. In that moment, she realized that she had been carrying the weight of other people's judgments for far too long. She had allowed the opinions of others to shape her sense of self, even though she had worked so hard to build her own identity. The gala incident had been the catalyst for this realization. But now that she had confronted it, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. Her husband, sensing the depth of her thoughts, took her hand in his. "I'm proud of you," he said simply, his voice full of sincerity. "You've always been strong, but now you're stronger than ever." The woman smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I don't think I could have done it without you," she admitted. "You've always been there for me, always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Her husband squeezed her hand, his expression softening. "That's because I see you for who you really are. I always have." As they sat together, the woman felt a deep sense of contentment. She had come a long way, from the hurt and humiliation of that night to a place of empowerment and clarity. She knew that she would never let herself be diminished by anyone again, no matter how much they tried. She would continue to push forward, building her career, her brand, and her legacy on her terms. In the days that followed, she found herself more focused on her work than ever before. She poured herself into her projects, channeling the lessons she had learned into everything she did. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a drive to succeed not for anyone else but for herself. She knew that she couldn't control how others treated her, but she could control how she responded, and she was determined to respond with confidence, grace, and strength. Her reputation in the industry began to shift. People noticed the change in her demeanor, the quiet confidence that radiated from her. She wasn't just a businesswoman anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she wasn't afraid to show it. As she attended more events and meetings, she found that the respect she had always sought was now coming naturally. People no longer questioned her ideas or her worth. They listened when she spoke, valued her input, and treated her as an equal. The woman realized that the respect she had been fighting for had always been within her grasp. It had just taken a change in perspective for her to see it. But the most important change wasn't in the way others saw her, it was in the way she saw herself. She had finally come to terms with the fact that her worth wasn't determined by anyone else's standards. She didn't need approval from others to know that she was successful. She had already built her empire on her own, and she had nothing to prove to anyone. One afternoon, she was in a meeting with a group of colleagues discussing an upcoming project. As the conversation progressed, she found herself speaking more freely, offering ideas without hesitation. Her voice was steady, her words confident. For the first time, she wasn't second-guessing herself, wondering if her ideas would be accepted. She knew that they were good ideas because they came from her. After the meeting, one of her colleagues, a U.S., approached her, a smile on his face. "You were great in there," he said. "I've noticed a real shift in you lately. It's impressive." The woman smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm. "It's been a journey." Her colleague nodded, clearly impressed. "I can tell. You've always been talented, but now it's like you've stepped into your power." Life had a way of moving forward, regardless of the hurdles we faced. For the woman, the weeks that followed felt like a steady climb up a mountain, each step building on the last. She had confronted the hurt, acknowledged her feelings, and most importantly, taken control. She had proven to herself that her worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval or opinions. But now, as time passed, she was beginning to see the full impact of her actions, not just in her own life, but in the way the people around her responded. She had changed, yes, but so had others. Her reputation was evolving not because of some grand gesture or public declaration, but because she had chosen to act with integrity and strength. Her colleagues noticed the shift in her demeanor. She was no longer the woman who second-guessed herself, who allowed herself to be diminished by those who didn't value her. Instead, she was someone who carried herself with quiet confidence, someone who demanded respect without ever needing to ask for it. One afternoon, she walked into a meeting with a group of senior executives, ready to discuss a new business opportunity. This was a moment she had been working toward for years, an opportunity to truly showcase her abilities. The stakes were high. But as she looked around the room, she didn't feel the usual rush of nerves. Instead, she felt calm, grounded. She was ready for this moment. As the meeting unfolded, she found herself speaking up more than ever. Her ideas flowed with ease, and each one was met with thoughtful consideration. She didn't feel the need to prove anything. She simply spoke, from her experience and her knowledge, confident in the value of what she was contributing. At the end of the meeting, one of the executives turned to her with a smile. "You've come a long way," he said. "I've always known you had potential, but today, you really owned the room." Her heart swelled with pride. It wasn't just about the praise. It was the fact that she no longer doubted herself. She didn't need external validation to know that she had earned her place. She had fought for it, and now, it was hers. Over the next few months, her business flourished. She took on more challenging projects, expanded her network, and continued to build relationships with people who respected her for who she was, not just for her title or position. She had stopped pretending to be something she wasn't in order to fit in. She had embraced her true self, flaws and all, and it was working. But the woman wasn't just focused on her professional growth. She also made sure to nurture her personal life, particularly her relationship with her husband. They had always been a team, but after the events of the past few months, their bond felt stronger than ever. He had stood by her when she needed him most, offering unwavering support and encouragement. Now she was more determined than ever to give back to him, to show him how much he meant to her. One evening, as they sat together on their porch watching the sunset, she turned to him with a soft smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "You've been my rock through all of this. I don't think I could have done it without you." Her husband smiled, his eyes warm with affection. "I've always believed in you," he said simply. "I knew you had it in you. All I did was remind you of that." She reached out, taking his hand in hers, her grip firm and sure. "You helped me see it. You helped me see that I don't have to prove anything to anyone but myself. I don't have to let anyone's opinions define me." They sat in silence for a while, the cool evening air brushing against their skin. It wasn't a silence that felt heavy or uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with understanding, with mutual respect. They had both grown, both learned valuable lessons in the process of facing adversity and finding strength in one another. As the weeks turned into months, the woman continued to reflect on the lessons she had learned. She thought back to the moments when she had allowed others to tear her down, when she had let their words and actions shake her confidence. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had changed. And she realized something. She would never again allow someone else's actions to dictate how she felt about herself. She had found her own voice, and no one could take that away from her. Her confidence wasn't born from arrogance or pride. It was born from a deep understanding of who she was and what she stood for. It was a quiet strength that came from within, from knowing that her worth wasn't tied to her job title or the opinions of others, but to the person she had become. One day she received a call from an old mentor. He had been a key figure in her career early on, offering guidance and advice when she was just starting out. They hadn't spoken in a while, but she had always valued his perspective. As they caught up, he asked her how things were going. "I'm good," she said, a smile in her voice. "Actually, I'm better than good. I feel like I've finally found my stride." Her mentor laughed softly. "I'm glad to hear that. I've always known you had something special in you. But I think what you've found is even more important than talent. You've found your confidence. And once you have that, nothing can stop you." Her heart swelled at his words. He was right. Confidence wasn't something that came from external achievements or accolades. It was something that came from within, from the belief that you were worthy of success and happiness, no matter what anyone else thought. As time passed, the woman found herself more at peace with who she was and what she had accomplished. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that gala months ago, humiliated and unsure of herself. She had evolved, transformed, and grown stronger with each challenge she faced. And now, she looked at herself in the mirror with pride. She was exactly who she was meant to be. Her husband, watching her evolve with admiration, knew that this was just the beginning. There was so much more ahead for her, so many more mountains to climb, so many more goals to reach. But he also knew that whatever came next, she would face it with the same strength, grace, and determination that she had shown throughout her journey. And so the woman continued her path, no longer defined by the opinions of others but by her own belief in herself. She had learned that the most important thing was not to seek approval, but to find peace within herself, to stand tall and proud of who she was and everything she had overcome. And in doing so, she had finally become the woman she had always been destined to be, the woman who owned her story, her power, and her future. Those words stuck with her. She had always known she had the ability, but now she could feel it in every fiber of her being. She had stepped into her power and she wasn't looking back. The weeks turned into months and the woman's career continued to flourish. She took on new challenges, pushed herself to try new things, and never stopped growing. She knew that life would always bring its challenges, but now she faced them with a sense of inner strength that could never be shaken. She had learned that no one could take her dignity or her worth. Only she had the power to define herself. One evening, as she sat with her husband at their favorite restaurant, she looked across the table at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "I think I'm finally starting to believe in myself," she said, her voice full of emotion. Her husband smiled, his eyes filled with love. "I always knew you could," he replied softly. "You just had to believe it yourself." And in that moment, the woman realized that the true victory wasn't in the confrontation, the apologies, or the external validation. It was in the quiet, unshakable belief she now had in herself. She had reclaimed her power and no one could take that away from her. Especially are often judged harshly. We're scrutinized for things that men would never be questioned about. We're expected to conform to certain standards, and when we don't, we're made to feel less than. That's what I want to change. I don't want to stay silent anymore. I don't want anyone to feel like I did that night. For a long moment, the room was quiet again. The guest's face softened as she absorbed the woman's words. "I see that now," she said, her tone apologetic. "I didn't think about how my words would affect you. I'll do better." The woman sat back, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't sure if the guest truly understood the impact of her actions, but in that moment it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had spoken up, that she had made her voice heard. She had taken control of her own narrative. As the meeting came to an end, the woman stood up, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "Thank you for listening," she said. "I hope this will be a reminder that words matter. We all need to be more mindful of how we treat others." The guest nodded, her eyes downcast. "I'll remember that. I really will." Walking out of the meeting, the woman felt different. She wasn't sure if the other woman's apology was sincere, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had done what she needed to do for herself. She had faced the source of her pain, and she had confronted it head-on. And in doing so, she had proven to herself that no one could take away her strength, her dignity, or her voice. When she returned home, her husband was waiting for her, his eyes filled with concern. He could tell by the look on her face that something had changed. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice gentle. She smiled, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't expected. "It went well, I did it." I confronted her. Her husband's face softened and he pulled her into a hug. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. The woman closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his embrace. She had done it. She had stood up for herself, and in doing so, she had reclaimed her power. It wasn't just about confronting one person. It was about taking control of her own story. And from that moment on, she knew she would never let anyone make her feel small again. At a beat. The idea of confronting the woman who had humiliated her was both terrifying and empowering. Part of her wanted to stay quiet, to let it go and move on. But another part of her, the part that had fought so hard to build her career and reputation, felt a fierce surge of anger. She wasn't just going to let someone like that disrespect her and get away with it. "I'm not sure," she admitted, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. "I don't know if I'm ready to make this a bigger issue, but I don't want to just let it slide either." Her husband nodded, understanding her hesitation. "We don't have to do anything right now. Take some time to think about it, but know that I'm here for you, whatever you decide." The woman sat back in her chair, her mind racing. The idea of confronting the guest at the gala filled her with dread. She didn't like conflict, didn't want to make a scene, but at the same time she couldn't ignore the injustice of it all. The woman had tried to tear her down, and now she had to decide whether to let that behavior go unchecked or to stand up for herself and take control of the situation. As the days passed, the woman found herself replaying the encounter in her mind over and over again. She thought about the comments that had been made, about how hurtful and cruel they had been. And she realized that the longer she stayed silent, the more power she was giving the person who had tried to humiliate her. She wasn't someone who ran from conflict, she was a fighter. And she wasn't about to let this woman have the last word. One evening, as she and her husband sat together on the porch enjoying the calm of the night, she made up her mind. "I want to confront her," she said, her voice steady. "I want to do it on my terms, not hers." Her husband's eyes lit up with pride. "I'm with you," he said, his voice full of support. "We'll do this together." The woman smiled, feeling a renewed sense of strength. She knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that she wasn't alone, and for the first time since the gala, she felt a spark of confidence return. She was ready to take control of her own narrative, to show the world exactly who she was, and no one, not even the woman who had humiliated her, could take that away. He handed her a glass. The soft clink of the glass against the table, the only sound in the room. They sat there for a while, neither speaking, just savoring the quiet comfort of being together. The woman took a sip of her wine, the cool liquid soothing her dry throat. It wasn't that the wine would fix anything, it wasn't that simple. But for the first time that night, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She was surrounded by love and understanding, and that made all the difference. Her husband finally broke the silence. "What do you want to do about it?" The woman looked at him, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his voice steady. "How do you want to handle this? Do you want to confront her? Do you want to let it go? It's your choice." The woman took a deep breath, considering his words. She had always been someone who confronted challenges head-on, but this situation was different. This wasn't a business problem or a minor disagreement. It was a personal attack, and that made it harder to deal with. But the idea of letting it go, of allowing the guest's words to go unchallenged, didn't sit well with her. "I don't know," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I don't know how to move forward from this." Her husband smiled gently, his hand resting on hers. "I'll support whatever you decide, but I think you should remember who you are. Don't let her steal your confidence." The woman nodded slowly, appreciating his words. She wasn't sure yet what she would do, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't let this moment define her. She wouldn't let someone else's cruelty control her. She had built her career on her strength, and she wasn't about to let a single incident tear that down. As the night stretched on, the woman began to feel a sense of clarity returning. The hurt was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. She realized that her worth wasn't defined by one person's opinion. It was defined by her actions, her work, and the respect she had earned over the years. And while the incident had shaken her, it wouldn't stop her from continuing to fight for her place in the world. The evening ended quietly, with both of them retreating to bed. But as she lay there in the dark, the woman made a vow to herself. She wouldn't let this define her. She would rise above it stronger than before, and when the time came, she would show the world exactly who she was, herself, and walked back to the event, her head held high. She knew that she couldn't let one person's words define her, especially not in front of everyone who admired her. She wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. But as she returned to the crowd, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Her husband was still standing near the bar, speaking with a group of guests. When he saw her approach, his eyes softened. He could tell that something was wrong. He moved toward her, taking her hand gently in his. He didn't say anything at first, but the concern in his eyes spoke volumes. The woman offered him a faint smile, trying to act like everything was fine. But he could see the tension in her posture, the way she was holding herself together. "I'm okay," she said softly, not wanting to make a scene. "It's nothing," but her husband knew better. He wasn't one to tolerate anyone disrespecting his wife, and he had witnessed enough of the conversation to know exactly what had happened. He could feel his protective instincts rising, but he held back, sensing that she needed space. He squeezed her hand, offering a quiet reassurance. The evening went on, but for the woman it was difficult to shake off the weight of what had happened. Her confidence had been rattled, and though she tried to push through, her mind kept returning to the hurtful comments. She tried to focus on the conversations around her, but everything felt distant. She had always prided herself on being strong, on being able to handle anything that came her way. But this was different. As the night wore on, the woman found herself retreating into the shadows of the event. She tried to smile and participate, but her mind was elsewhere. Her husband, noticing her withdrawal, stayed close, never leaving her side. He didn't press her to talk, but it was clear he was watching over her, ready to protect her from any further humiliation. The evening came to an end, and the couple made their way back to their car. The woman was quiet, lost in her thoughts. Her husband, sensing the lingering tension, reached over and gently touched her arm. "We'll talk about it when we get home," he said, his voice calm but filled with concern. As they drove through the city, the woman felt the weight of the evening lifting slowly. She was still angry, still hurt by the words that had been said, but she knew that her husband had her back, and that made all the difference. She wasn't alone in this. The evening had been difficult, but it had also revealed something important. She wasn't just a figure in the industry. She was a woman who had people who cared about her, who would stand by her no matter what.